Hello everybody, I have some huge news here that DE recently announced, and it's that Oberon is getting a rework, and this rework is pretty major. Pretty much everything about him, his entire ability kit is getting changed in some way. I mean, they're the same abilities, except the passive, which is completely changing, but they all have way different, uses now, and it's honestly a lot better. Oberon is absolutely needed a rework for a very long time. Kind of had outdated abilities, didn't really function that well as a support frame, and that was like his whole point. And he felt kind of awkward to use. I've had Oberon for a very long time. He was the very first frame I crafted on my PC account, probably like 5-6 years ago. And I've had him forever, but I've probably used him less than almost every other frame I've crafted, if not less than every other frame that I've crafted. I mean, he probably wouldn't really be used at all if he didn't look so cool. That's probably the only reason he's getting used recently before this rework, is because he actually looks pretty flippin' awesome. But anyway, let's get right into the rework and what happened. First off, this is pretty major, is that his passive got changed. His original passive allowed allied companions to receive 25% health link, an armor link, and shield link from Oberon. In addition, your companion receives an instant revive per mission, one instant revive per mission. Passive literally only helps companions, so it's like your dog or your allies' dogs, I think. I don't know if it does your allies, I just know it does your own dogs, your own sentinels, whatever you might be using. Obviously, that is a absolutely terrible passive. His new passive is actually insane. It's actually kind of Mesmer skin like. It's a very familiar, very similar to Mesmer skin here. And sorry, I have to let my dog in real quickly and edit that part out. But it's very similar to Mesmer skin. It looks absolutely awesome. Also, sorry for the setup if it sounds a little bit weird. I'm getting these videos out and I can't be in my original setup or normal setup, just because I'm trying to talk about this new update so much. But his new ability is called Righteous Negation, or that's the effect. And the new passive is picking up a health orb, or a universal orb, generates a Righteous Negation charge for Oberon and allies within affinity radius. Oberon and his allies have individual caps of 3 Righteous Negation charges. A Righteous Negation charge is, if a player has a Righteous Negation charge, they are invulnerable to incoming damage. When incoming damage is blocked, one Righteous Negation charge is expended. If a player has multiple Righteous Negation charges, they will remain invulnerable and receive a small 0.25 second cooldown before an additional Righteous Negation charge can be depleted. If the damage removes their final Righteous Negation charge, players will be granted an additional 0.25 seconds of invulnerability. Players can identify how many Righteous Negation charges they have via the buff indicator in their HUD, or by counting the number of floating shields that circle around them. So I know I said a lot there, but basically, it breaks down to a Righteous Negation is a crappy version of Mesmer Shield. If you just pick up a health orb or universal orb, whatever you pick up, everyone on your team will get invincibility for a little bit, which is absolutely insane, as long as they're in infinity range. So that's a really good ability. That's way better than the passive before that only helped companions, which is an absolutely terrible passive, maybe the worst in the game. And it became a really useful passive that doesn't take much, thinking at all to really help benefit your entire team and potentially save their lives if things get a little bit risky. So honestly, this new passive is absolutely huge and is a huge buff to Oberon that I'm very excited for. Also, Oberon has received increased armor. He went from 185 to 385 for basic Oberon and went from 240 to 450 for Oberon Prime. So that's another straight up buff. So right off the bat, we have 2 huge buffs for Oberon. Let's talk about his first ability, Smite. And Smite is an ability that I typically really didn't use before. It wasn't great, I feel like, because I feel like nothing on Oberon was really that great, but Smite's updates are actually pretty crazy here. Let me just go over Smite's changes real quick they have posted for us. Smite's target is now completely stripped of overguard and armor, which is insane, and they lose 35% of their health and shields, and it can be capped up at 75. That is actually so crazy. It completely shreds their overguard and their armor. I mean, that's going to be so good for Xmas or any tough enemies. I mean, it's absolutely a wild ability right there, a wild buff that just makes it 10 times better. The target is also force staggered and open to melee finishers. Smite does not bypass shields though, so those affect the final damage to health. Okay, that makes sense. Enemies within 6 meters of the target receives 50% of the damage dealt and are impacted by stagger. What? So you're telling me if they're within 6 meters of a really strong enemy that you use Smite on, they're all probably going to die. Because it does a percent damage of the strong enemy, so obviously most of those enemies will be pretty weak. And let's say they're not 75% of the health of one of the enemies, they might just get killed by Smite, straight up. So Smite could be absolutely devastating if you use it on an Eximus or powerful enemy that's in a horde of enemies. What an increased ability. Originally, Smite did have orbs that would seek enemies to hit them, but they are removing those orbs. I think it had 6 orbs. Let's see here. It had 6 orbs. Each orb would have a 35% radiation damage and did a flat rate of 150 damage. It didn't do a percent amount of damage. So the orbs are pretty shitty, but now we're doing a 50% damage of the Smite, which is a lot better. So this is a way better than whatever the orbs were. The orbs were absolute dog shit. Plus it only hit 6 enemies. With this hitting enemies within 6 meters of the target, it could hit up to 10 enemies depending on how close they are together. So this is pretty awesome. Smite is a huge buff. Also, they say if Smite is cast into a tight group of enemies, Eximus units will be prioritized as the target, meaning that you don't have to be worried about missing your shots, and it will always go after probably the strongest enemy. So that's awesome that they did that for us. It's just an ease of life thing right there. So Smite absolutely got a massive buff, and it's pretty insane, and I really do love to see it. Now we need to talk about Hallowed Ground. And now they didn't change Hallowed Ground an extreme amount. They just changed like some of the, I don't want to say like the effects of it. I want to say like it's like shape and how easy it is to place and stuff like that. Hallowed Ground is now a full circle. Ability range increases its radius instead of the arc. Also increase the height of Hallowed Grounds to affect both flying enemies and double jumping allies alike. Due to the increased size of Hallowed Ground, we reduced the maximum number of Hallowed Grounds from 4 to 3. Overall, that's a pretty big buff because who the hell is putting 4 Hallowed Grounds down? They used to stack, but do they stack still? Let's see. We'll talk about it later. Nullifiers no longer destroy Hallowed Ground. Instead, their bubbles simply nullify its effects for anyone inside it. This is also a huge buff with the Nullifiers because originally you would lose your entire Hallowed Ground ability just because an enemy with a nullifier walked into it, but now the enemy can walk all over it, and while they still won't be affected by it, it will leave that Hallowed Ground there to affect other enemies. So another really good buff for Oberon there. Radiation damage from Hallowed Ground now gives guaranteed radiation status effects. Previously it was at 15% chance at max rank, so we went from 15% to 100% for radiation status effects. I don't know what do you call that. That is a major buff, a 500% increase of power. Ridiculous. That is awesome. What a buff for Hallowed Ground. Radiation status effects are now going to be for sure. That is amazing. Renewal healing is doubled while standing on Hallowed Ground. So the Iron Renewal buff no longer requires interaction with Hallowed Ground. See Renewal changes for more information. So obviously there was some armor stuff that went on with Hallowed Ground with Renewal, but you also get double healing on Hallowed Ground now, which is insane, dude. There's so many buffs going into Hallowed Ground. Hallowed Ground is actually so much better. It's way more than just ease of life stuff. Holy shit. They removed the armor stripping from enemies that survive Reckoning, as that mechanic is now being added to Reckoning itself. So basically when you use Reckoning before, while they were on Hallowed Ground, they'd be permanently lose armor, but now enemies will just permanently lose armor whenever you use Reckoning, but we'll talk about that later. The status effect Cleansing and Immunity is unchanged for Oberon and his allies. So basically when you're in Hallowed Ground, you can't be affected by status change, can't be staggered, can't get like slash damage, stuff like that. So Hallowed Ground has got a huge buff. I guess it still can be stacked. I didn't realize that. So that's my bad. The next ability we're going to talk about is Renewal. Why can't I say that? Renewal. What is wrong with me? I can't say that word. I'm about to crash out. Anyway, they removed the increased energy cost per target for Renewal. Sorry, I'm just going to keep saying it wrong, I guess. Which is actually really good because originally the energy cost per target was 3. I mean, if you got 4 or 5 targets in there, that was draining like 20 energy every 4 seconds. It was absolutely ridiculous how much energy it was draining from you, which made it almost unusable, to be completely honest with you. Renewal now costs a flat 3.5 energy per second. It is active regardless of the number of allies it is healing, which is just much better, a much cheaper use, so it's just way better, honestly. That's such a huge buff. Renewal's range is now Oberon's affinity range. Previously, Renewal would actually be set to a certain area on the map, but now it moves with Oberon instead of applying only in a static zone. So it's strange because why they say that they're right, it would be a static area on the map. However, you could leave that area and still get some of the buffs that come with Renewal. So it's a little bit weird. As long as Renewal was active, you would still get the buffs from it, but now it just kind of follows Oberon around, which is interesting. Players affected by Renewal are given the Iron Renewal buff, which increases armor by 50% for the casting Oberon and 100% for allies. That's absolutely huge, and it's just like completely new, something that we didn't have before. Renewal no longer stacks with other renewals, which, you know, makes sense because now it just follows Oberon around. The most effective renewal will take priority if players are in range of multiple casts. Update Renewal's noises to make it clear when it's being channeled. Players can identify when Renewal is active by the crown of energy around Oberon's brow. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. I like that. It wasn't a huge buff here. Renewal still isn't exactly an amazing skill, but it was definitely buffed a little bit. Probably the smallest change of all of the abilities here, for sure. So it's not hugely different, but it still is better by a little bit. Let's move on to Ability 4, Reckoning, which got quite a bit of changes, which I like a lot. Reckoning now only targets enemies in Oberon's line of sight. Ironically, I don't think that's actually good. That's actually a debuff. Ironically, starting off there. But there's been plenty of buffs to make up for that line of sight thing. Increase the bonus damage to enemies affected by radiation status effects from a flat 625 to 750 per stack of radiation. In other words, the damage is doubled if the target has maximum radiation stacks. With the guaranteed radiation status effects to those standing on Hallowed Ground, it should be easier to ensure they receive that bonus damage. They just increased the synergy between two abilities so much there, which is awesome. They made both abilities stronger and also have created synergy between them, so you want to use both abilities, Hallowed Ground and Reckoning, together. Oberon receives 10 armor per enemy hit. Bonus armor is capped at 1000 and persists for 30 seconds. The bonus armor cap does not scale, but the duration can be increased by mods. Enemies affected by radiation status give an additional 5 armor per hit. So that's pretty good. You can get pretty ridiculous armor by that, especially if they do have radiation status, which you can get by using Hallowed Ground, which just kind of incentivizes you to use Hallowed Ground whenever you use Reckoning. Surviving enemies have 50% of their armor permanently removed. This mechanic was originally tied to Hallowed Ground. That interaction is no longer required to remove armor. Otherwise, the armor reduction is unchanged, and it was a critical part of Oberon's kit. So basically now you always will 100% of the time get that 50% of armor permanently removed, which is absolutely amazing. All enemies hit by Reckoning have a 50% chance of dropping a health orb upon death, regardless of whether they were killed by Reckoning or not. Oh, that's interesting. So if they were hit by it, they still have that chance. That's a buff. It's not a huge one, but it is a little bit of a buff. Reckoning no longer blinds enemies, which is actually a debuff, but because Oberon spreads radiation through his kit, it kind of doesn't make sense to blind enemies because you're going to want the enemies with radiation to hit each other a little bit and affect each other. But, you know, still it's kind of a debuff because the blinding was nice. They also slightly increased the casting speed apparently. Not sure how much that's going to be. They didn't give us a specific amount here, but faster is always better. So that's Oberon's rework. I'll be honest with you, I'm very happy with it. I feel like all 4 of his abilities got buffed. The one that got the least amount of work put in is probably Renewal, which is a shame because Renewal kind of still just sucks. But Reckoning got buffed pretty well, and then Smite got buffed to an insane amount, and Hallowed Ground honestly also got buffed to an insane amount. Then obviously the passive change was absolutely critical and huge, and he got increased armor. So overall, while there was some changes that weren't exactly a buff, like removing the blinding from Reckoning, overall the changes were very positive, make Oberon a lot stronger and a lot more optimal to use. I'll definitely be using Oberon after this, and I'll be excited to use him. So yeah, that's all I have to say about this one. I think it's a great change. I think they did a great job with the buff. I don't think it actually makes Oberon that overpowered either. Even looking at all these stats and different abilities and what they added, I still don't think Oberon's even a top tier frame for my own personal opinion, even when you add these things in. I think they just kind of made him, you know, to fit in with the rest of the pack, which is good. I think he's going to be fun to use. I think a lot of people are going to start using him again, or, well, again, start using him in the first place. He's still one of the coolest looking frames. His design is awesome, so it's really cool to see this. Also, I wonder if there's a hidden link with him getting this rework and his somewhat religious themed ability names, because he has Smite here, he has Hallowed Ground, he has Renewal, I can't say it still, and Reckoning. So he has like some religious themes around him. And the newest Warframe update that's coming out soon with like Roth, with the Harrow's proto-frame, who's a priest, and then Mary, who's a nun for the proto-frame for Wisp. I wonder if there's some kind of connection going on here where he's going to be included in this at some point because he has some religious themes around his frame as well. I'm actually kind of surprised they don't release a proto frame for him, but it's super exciting. We'll see what's going on with that, I guess. But the Oberon rework looks great, and I'm excited to use Oberon after the rework actually comes in and affects him. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay blessed, stay happy. I'm trying to grind out these videos talking about this new content for you. I'm super excited talking about it. Damn. And as you can tell, I'm all over the place. But thank you guys so much for watching. Stay blessed, stay happy. Hope to see you guys all in the next one, and goodbye.